Hello everybody and welcome to DJ Tutorials. This is going to be the first of a long series on the LuxCore render engine for Blender. It's a free add-on and I'm going to be showing you the ins and outs of it in a lot of smaller pieces, which is going to be a lot different than my crash course on the Radeon Pro Render engine. And this one's basically just going to be on the downloading and installation of the LuxCore engine. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel so that you can get all of the updates and the newest videos as they come out. Now, if you don't know anything about this engine, really the big benefit is the way that it handles realistic renders, especially in lighting and caustics. If you go to the website, you can look at a couple examples of this. This is one that shows how some of these really cool prismatic effects can happen with light tracing. And you can basically go to the channel, take a look at a couple example renders. Some of them are going to be better than others, to be honest, but the engine really is amazing, and it's free, which makes it great. It doesn't have as much support as the Blender Cycles and EV engines, so sometimes you will run into some issues. But altogether, I would say this is a very, very good engine to have under your belt, and one that you really would benefit knowing how to use, because specifically I would say how it handles interior renders and how it handles glass, refraction, caustics, water effects, things like that. You really can't get this kind of effect with cycles out of the box. You have to do a lot of fixes and changes to get this sort of look. So since this one's going to be basically just how to download and install and just an general overview of the engine, what you want to do is you want to go to the luxcorerender.org website, go to the downloads, and make sure that you pick your operating system. I'm not really sure how well this works on Mac. I understand that sometimes there are some issues with Linux. I use Windows, so whatever one that you use is right here. There's also the standalone versions here that will basically have, as far as I understand, it basically has a built-in Blender version with it or something like that. I really don't use that. The add-on should work completely fine. And right here it says that it works with Blender 2.82 and 2.83. I am using Blender 2.9 and it works pretty much fine. I've tested it on the 2.83 and there are some issues in general. I'm using an AMD graphics card. If you have an NVIDIA card, it will work fine. There's just some issues there that I'm working out with the developers right now. But in general, anything should work pretty much fine. And you'll just want to download this. So click your button, whatever the operating system is, it's going to show up at the bottom, and you'll wait for that to finish downloading. Now, while that's downloading, I'm going to show you really quick how to uninstall an old version of this render engine. So we're going to go ahead and open up Blender here, and I'm going to show you how to uninstall a previous version of this and install a new one. So you go to Edit, Preferences, go to Add-ons, and you'll do a search for Lux, and there you can see the LuxCore render engine. And down here where it says Remove, you want to click this button, hit OK, and it's going to give you this sort of stuff here. So you'll just close this down, close down Blender, open it back up. And I know this seems a little bit tedious, but this is, really how you do it with both ProRender and with LuxCore. Do a search again for Lux, click the remove button again, and that will remove it completely. Close this down, open it back up, and by the time you're done there, the LuxCore engine zip file should be finished. So it's still finishing up here. But while that's happening, I'm going to show you what I do to place these new versions into, well, just onto my computer. So here I have my downloads. You can see right here I have the Blend LuxCore version 2.4. And I'm going to open up a new window here. And what I do is I save all of my Blender add-ons into a folder on my hard drive. So in this folder here, LuxCore, I have a version 2.4. For ProRender, I have a lot of different folders. You might have development builds, and then you can have an official, or I'll just call it release folder. Spell that correctly with an R. And you can see right here, I already have 2.4 that I downloaded. I'm just going to put that into the release folder. So I'm going to copy this file path just to make it easier when I go to search. But basically, you want this zip file. Don't unzip the zip file, okay? We're going to jump back into Blender here. You're going to go to Edit, Preferences, Install, and I'll just show you that really quick again. When you go to the Preferences, make sure that you go to the Add-ons button, click the Install button. At the top, you can paste your file path, and there's the zip file right there. Click the Install Add-on button, wait a moment for it to install, and there you have it right there. You can click some of these buttons with the documentation, report a bug, remove, all that kind of stuff is right here. Click the checkbox to turn it on, and there you go. From this point here, what you need to do is you need to go over to the Render Properties tab right here and change the render engine to LuxCore. And you have your device selection here. I'm just going to keep it on CPU just to keep it easy. I'm not going to, well, I guess I will go into some of that stuff just to get you started. But this is not a full crash course. This is a series on this engine because really there's a lot of stuff in it and it deserves to have independent videos to talk about more specific things. So I'm going to keep it on CPU for right now. You have your light paths just like you would in Cycles. You have this button here called light tracing, which I'll talk about in a moment. And you have a whole bunch of stuff here, different ways of doing sampling, different ways of doing uh, your denoising, all that kind of stuff here. Now, now one of the really cool things about it is that you can actually use cycle settings with it and just use the engine itself to do renders and add a couple features. So that's really great that there's some compatibility there. Just keep in mind that not everything from Cycles or Eevee is 100% compatible. There are some things that are, some things that aren't. So you'll have to just get used to that. I'm not going to go too much into that in this episode. But you also have this right here that's called the Render Settings Helper. And really that this is more for the end of the your project or maybe in the middle when you start adding some materials. But let's just create a plane. I'm going to move the uh, cube up a little bit to just set it on the floor plane. And we're just going to go to the rendered view so I can show you what's going on here. So we have a general, it starts off with this sort of sky background lighting, and you have some generic stuff here. I'm going to go to the materials property, and I'm just going to click one of these buttons under the node tree presets. Again, this is not a full demo on the entire engine and how everything works. I'm just showing you some basics to get you started. So I'm going to click on the glass here, and then on the floor, I'm going to click on, let's just click on Disney, and we'll just leave that as it is. And I'm going to go to the world properties right here, and I'm going to click on this button here that says HDRI, and I'm going to click on Open under HDRI settings, and I'm just going to pick an HDRI map that shows the outside so you can just kind of see some of the lighting and what happens in this engine and some of the things that make it really amazing. So you can see right here, I have this beautiful ray traced engine with some really nice looking shadows. And all that I'm using here is an HDRI and the basic lamp and some really, really basic settings here for the materials. And what really makes this shine as far as an engine is what's called the light tracing. And I'm going to show you how to turn this on with a very, very basic setting here. If you go to the render settings helper and you click this button, it'll say here, please choose. And it says, should cycles, settings, and shaders be used? Let's just say no. Is your scene indoors or outdoors? Let's just say it's outdoors or studio. And then right here it says, are there caustics? Caustics are basically when there's something like a glass or something like that that's refracting light, and you're going to kind of see that refracted light through it. If you'd like to know more about it, you could see my tutorial series specifically on caustics in a bunch of different engines. But let's take a look at this here again. So let's go, should cycles, settings, and shaders be used? No. Outdoors or studio? And then let's say yes, okay? It says, are the caustics visible in a mirror or are they viewed through glass, i.e. a pool or something like that? And we're going to say yes because we have a cube here that's glass and light should be seen, the caustic should be seen through this. So we're going to put yes and just leave this lookup radius alone. Let's not worry about that. And at the bottom here, just click OK. And so then what that does is it adds this little thing right here called light tracing. So let's reset the rendering. And I'm going to take this lamp right here, if I can select it. And we'll just give this a moment. So you can see that there's a couple different things that are being portrayed here. You can see that there's this new sort of like thing being thrown through here. Let's actually change this. You can see that it went to the GPU setting here for the device. It actually works a bit faster on my computer right now to do CPU for the viewport. So I'm going to do CPU, and we're going to make sure light tracing is on there. And I'm just going to grab this light and I'm going to put it really, really close to the glass here. And then we're going to look at that through the rendered view. And you can see that it does a different sort of set of render, sort of like render lines. And if I take this lamp and let's do like 1500 or something like that, you can see that now there is a different thing that's being shown here as far as the lighting. You can see this right here. And if I take this and let's just add a subdivision modifier, of a 3, and we're just gonna keep it flat for right now just so I can show you. You can see that where that subdivision is and all those planes that you could see here on the glass. Let's zoom in a little bit more. You can see that there's this, this sort of disco ball effect going on, and you can see that the light is being refracted through that object, and here you have caustics, and there you have the light tracing right here. So again, I'm going to take off the light tracing really quick just so you could see. So here's without light tracing. This is something that you would kind of see very similar to Cycles or even ProRender. And if I turn on the light tracing, you could see that there's quite a bit of a different effect going on. And if I go to the world settings, change the gain down to a 0.2 just so you could see even more. Actually, let's just turn it completely off. And you could see that if I take this and I drag this around, how that light tracing is affected. And if I put it into the object, it has a different effect. If I put it above, you could see that there's a different effect happening there and all of that. Let's actually change this down to, let's try 250 and see how that does. So you can see how the softness of the light and the brightness of the light will change the way that this stuff is being refracted off. Just a really quick side note for those of you who want to use GPU rendering instead of just the CPU, that's really great. I'm all for it. When it comes to using the OpenCL, which is with AMD graphics cards, if I go over here to Edit Preferences and I go to System, you can see right here I have OpenCL 2 Radeon 7s. So I am using AMD cards which use the OpenCL API to render. All that means is that it has its own version of how it uses the components inside of your GPU to render your scene. If you have an NVIDIA card, you will see that there's a CUDA setting here, and optics will most likely not be usable with this particular engine, and it won't even be these options don't even work for this engine. You have to do it a little bit differently, but I'm just showing you that I use the OpenCL cards. Now, with LuxCore and with almost any other render engine or rendering software, NVIDIA is usually favored, so there tends to be a little bit of issues. And if you go here to the devices, you change this to GPU, give it a moment, you'll notice that some of the viewport rendering is a little bit not super responsive. And I actually have a very fast computer. I have a Threadripper 3960, so the viewport renders fairly quickly on my CPU. But when using the GPU, it's a little bit tricky. So if I go down here, once you select your device to GPU, you go down here to devices, you'll see this little error or warning button. Click the update device list and you'll see your different render devices right down here. So I'm just going to select one of these. So I'm going to uncheck one of those, and you'll see that there is a little bit of a delay there. And part of that has to do with the fact that it's trying to do the light tracing, which uses the CPU, and the GPU is doing more of the other sort of computations that are involved. So since I found that with the OpenCL cards that I have, or AMD cards, the CPU just works a little bit faster. For you, it might be different. And again, this is only particularly talking about the light tracing here, which needs to have the CPU active anyway. So it just tends to work a little bit faster for me to use CPU, and you might see me use that quite a bit for the viewport rendering. When you do get to your final render, you can always turn on GPU and choose your different devices. And if you have an NVIDIA card, please leave a comment down below on how either well it works or if you see a similar issue, because it'd be really nice to know if NVIDIA cards do work better in conjunction with the CPU settings in this particular engine. So hopefully that gives you enough of a beginner's tutorial on how to install, download and install this thing and just start playing around with some things. And look forward to my future episodes where we talk about more details on how to change all of the render settings, how to add certain features, how to use lasers, all kinds of stuff that's really great in this engine. Make sure that you subscribe and keep up on the new videos that I'll be releasing. And I'll see you next time on DJ Tutorials.